Welcome to the fourth dimension. Tonight, we explore one of the most disturbing national park disappearances in U.S. history, an unsolved missing persons mystery swallowed whole by the forests of Mount Rainier, Washington state. Some places on this planet don't want you there. They exist on the edge of maps, where the silence grows heavy and the trees watch from the shadows. Places where footsteps echo back, not because of the land, but because something else is following. This is the story of Elaine Robertson, who walked into Mount Rainier National Park in 1979 and vanished. A true missing 411 case that continues to haunt rangers, hikers, campers, and search teams, leaving behind more questions than answers. But ask yourself this. What is taking people from our national parks, wilderness trails, and remote forests? Is it cryptids, paranormal forces, government cover-ups, or something far darker waiting beyond the tree line? Elaine Robertson was 34 years old, a mother of 2 young children, and a nurse at a small hospital in Tacoma, Washington. She had a reputation among friends and colleagues as someone who carried herself with quiet strength, steady hands in an emergency, sharp instincts, and the kind of practical, no-nonsense outlook you'd expect from someone who had spent years tending to others. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive about the risks of the wilderness. But by the summer of 1979, Elaine was at a crossroads. A difficult divorce had left her shaken, questioning who she was outside of being a wife, a mother, and a caregiver. Friends would later recall that she often spoke of needing a place to breathe, somewhere she could reset her thoughts. To her sister, she confided, "If I can't figure out who I am in the mountains, I don't think I'll figure it out anywhere." For Elaine, Mount Rainier wasn't just a hiking trip. It was a pilgrimage into something larger than herself, something ancient, untamed, and perhaps unforgiving. Mount Rainier is no ordinary mountain. At 14,410 feet, it dominates the horizon of western Washington, its snow-draped summit visible for over 100 miles on a clear day. But beauty and danger walk hand in hand there. Rainier is a stratovolcano, alive beneath its glacial skin, a colossal mass of rock and ice known for violent avalanches, sudden storms, and crevasses hidden beneath seemingly solid snow. To climbers and locals alike, the mountain inspires awe, but also a deep respect, even fear. The national park surrounding Rainier is a place of staggering contrasts. Dense forests of Douglas fir and cedar cloak the lower elevations, giving way to alpine meadows where wildflowers bloom in dizzying colors during the short summers. Above those meadows, glaciers twist and fracture like frozen rivers from another world. But behind the postcard beauty lies a darker truth. The park has long been a magnet for strange disappearances. Rangers quietly acknowledge the mountain's reputation. Locals whisper about it openly, calling Rainier a place that swallows people whole. Search and rescue teams know all too well that when someone vanishes here, the odds of finding them, alive or dead, are slim. The mountain has a way of erasing traces, leaving only questions. Elaine chose the Skyline Trail for her journey, a 6-mile loop that begins at the Paradise Visitor Center. Paradise is famous for its sweeping views of Rainier's glaciers and meadows, but the trail itself is deceptively wild. One moment, it's all sunshine and open ridgelines. The next, fog can roll in like a wall, swallowing hikers in minutes. Rangers often warn newcomers that the Skyline Trail, though popular, is unpredictable, even lethal, when the weather shifts. On the morning of July 12, 1979, Elaine signed her name into the day hike register at Paradise. It was a warm, clear day, one of those rare windows of perfect visibility when the mountain feels almost inviting. Witnesses remembered her looking well prepared, Sturdy hiking boots laced tight, a small day pack slung over her shoulder, a windbreaker tucked under her arm. She carried no tent, no overnight supplies, nothing to suggest she intended to stray far from the well-worn trail. Everything about her pointed to a short day hike and a safe return, but Rainier has a way of turning certainty into mystery. Elaine Robertson walked into the wilderness that morning. She never walked back out. Elaine was last seen around 11:30 a.m., her figure cutting a calm silhouette against the bright backdrop of the trail. Other hikers recalled that she smiled easily, her voice light when she asked about the conditions ahead. Nothing about her demeanor suggested fear, distress, or hesitation. She appeared comfortable, like a woman at peace with her decision to take this solitary trek. From the trailhead up to Panorama Point, everything seemed ordinary. Hikers descending later reported seeing her standing briefly at the overlook, gazing across the sprawling forest below. One man even remembered joking that she had the whole mountain to herself today. Elaine laughed, a sound that carried faintly across the wind. That was the last time anyone heard her voice. Past Panorama Point, the air grows colder. The terrain narrows into shadowed switchbacks and silent groves of ancient fir. A strange quiet is said to settle there, so still that hikers often remark it feels like stepping into a different world. The kind of silence that presses into your ears until your own heartbeat becomes thunder. That's where Elaine went next. By evening, when she hadn't returned, concern grew. Rangers launched their first sweep at dusk. At dawn the following morning, helicopters thundered low across the ridgelines, while dog teams pushed into the timberline. Over 70 volunteers canvassed the mountain, their bright jackets flickering like beacons against the wilderness. It didn't take long before they found what might have been her trail. Her footprints veered off the established path, pressing deeper into a stand of old-growth woods, a part of the mountain most hikers avoided. Rangers described the woods there as oppressive, unnaturally dark, the canopy so thick that daylight seemed to thin out to a dusky haze. And then, the strangest detail of all, the prints stopped. Abruptly. Not like she turned back. Not like she ran. They just ended. As if Elaine had been lifted off the earth. There were no drag marks, no broken branches, no scatter of gear. Her pack wasn't found. Her water bottle wasn't lying discarded. Her jacket wasn't snagged on a tree. Nothing. The forest floor swallowed every clue. One of the searchers later confessed, anonymously, that when they reached the final footprint, the dogs refused to go further. They whined, circled, then sat back on their haunches, eyes fixed upward into the trees, as though tracking something that wasn't there. Searchers described the woods around Panorama Point as wrong. Not just quiet, wrong. One ranger later recalled that the air seemed unnaturally still, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums until you start to hear your own pulse. It wasn't the normal hush of the forest. It was more like the mountain itself was holding its breath. One volunteer swore that on the second night, while combing through the timberline, they heard faint laughter, childlike, distant, carried on the wind. The voice echoed between the trees, impossible to trace. No one else admitted to hearing it, but the man refused to return the next day. He told a local reporter years later that whatever it wasn't a person. The search dogs added to the unease. Animals trained for years in tracking suddenly cowered, tails tucked, whining at the edges of certain clearings. Handlers tried to coax them forward, but the dogs would plant their paws, growl low, and refuse to advance. It was as if something invisible stood in their way, radiating a fear beyond instinct. 3 days in, a rescue helicopter pilot radioed that he spotted something unusual, a flash of color amid the unbroken white of the upper snowfields. It looked like a piece of fabric, bright against the mountain's pale expanse. A team was dispatched immediately. They scoured the area for hours, sinking waist-deep in snow, but found nothing. Not a shred of fabric, not even a depression in the snow where something could have been. When the pilot retraced his flight path later, the patch of color was gone. By the fifth day, several searchers reported hearing something else, low, rhythmic thuds in the night. At first they thought it was falling ice or distant rock slides, but the sound repeated at irregular intervals, echoing through the valleys. One man described it as footsteps too heavy to be human, but too deliberate to be natural. Despite hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, dogs, and weeks of coordinated effort, no evidence of Elaine was ever recovered. Not a scrap of clothing, not a backpack strap, not even a lone boot. It was as if the mountain had devoured her whole, erasing every trace she ever existed there. Veteran searchers later admitted off the record that the case disturbed them more than almost any other. Normally, the wilderness leaves breadcrumbs, shreds of fabric caught on branches, footprints in mud, signs of struggle, or discarded gear. But Elaine's trail ended abruptly after Panorama Point, like a sentence cut mid-word. After 2 exhausting weeks, the official search was called off. But whispers continued. Years later, hikers stumbled across ranger station logs that mention Elaine's case, pages that detail unusual atmospheric conditions and anomalous reports among volunteers. Families visiting Rainier sometimes hear her story around campfires, always told with lowered voices, as though invoking her name might draw something out of the trees. Her case file remains open, untouched, except for the occasional addition of sightings. Hikers who swear they saw a woman in outdated hiking clothes watching them from ridgelines, only to vanish when they blink. The most grounded theory is that Elaine was the victim of an opportunistic predator. With thousands of visitors flocking to Mount Rainier every summer, it's not impossible that someone with dark intentions was lurking on the trail. The dense wilderness provides perfect cover for someone who knows the terrain, someone who could slip in and out unseen. But there are holes in this theory. No signs of struggle, no tracks. No other witnesses reported suspicious figures that day. For someone to abduct her in broad daylight, erase every trace of her presence, and avoid all detection for weeks of searching, it would take inhuman precision, almost as though the predator knew how to walk unseen. The mountain itself is a hungry beast. Hidden crevasses, unstable snow bridges, caves yawning open beneath the glaciers, all could swallow a person whole. If Elaine slipped into one of these natural traps, her body may be entombed beneath ice forever. But again, even accidents leave evidence. A torn strap, a glove, a single item surfacing in the melt. The searchers combed every possible hazard zone, even lowering ropes into fissures. Nothing. The mountain gave up no secrets. This is where Elaine's disappearance drifts into darker territory. Rainier is tied to countless legends of things that walk just beyond human sight. Sasquatch, shadow figures, and older beings recorded in native lore. The Tsimekwes were said to lure travelers into the woods, never to return. Some point to the behavior of the dogs, the strange silences, the laughter in the trees. These are classic hallmarks of something unnatural at work. Others go further. They suggest Rainier is a node of strange energy, a thinning place between worlds. Missing 411 researchers have long suspected that certain areas act as portals, where people can step or be pulled into another reality. Could Elaine have stumbled into one of these places? Did she hear something, follow something, and walk straight out of our world. Elaine Robertson was not reckless. She wasn't lost, disoriented, or careless. She was a nurse, a mother, a woman who wanted clarity after hardship. She walked up the mountain on a warm summer morning and was never seen again. What happened to her remains one of Mount Rainier's most chilling mysteries. Was she taken by a predator clever enough to erase all trace? Did the mountain claim her in some cruel accident of nature? Or was she pulled into something older, something that waits in the tree line, just beyond sight? Her disappearance is one of many in our national parks, part of a growing pattern of vanishings that leave no evidence, no answers, and no closure. Each case leaves us with the same gnawing question. What is taking people from our national parks? The next time you hike a trail, pause when the forest grows too quiet. Feel the weight of that silence. Ask yourself, are you really alone? Because maybe, just maybe, the wilderness is watching. And if it wants you, it won't let you leave.